Welcome to the Wickedly Smart Women podcast, featuring stellar conversations with emerging and established wickedly smart women. Thanks for joining us today as we celebrate women who are committed, care deeply, and have the courage to take action and create conscious change all around the world. Now here's your wickedly smart host, Angel B. Hartwell.
Welcome to another episode of the Wickedly Smart Women podcast, where we celebrate wickedly smart women and provide our listeners with a wealth of wisdom along with immediately actionable steps to be smarter, spunkier, and more successful in their impact and their leadership. This is your host, Angel B. Hartwell, and today we welcome our special guest, Kate Johnson. Kate is the owner and lead instructor at The Art of Cheese, one of the busiest cheesemaking schools in the country. In her previous life, she was a career development professional and board-certified life coach until she coached herself right out of her coaching job by following her own advice. She turned two of her hobbies and passions, dairy goats and cheesemaking, into a thriving career. Kate is also a writer, author, and public speaker, as well as an avid volunteer in the 4-H community, coaching kids how to raise and show dairy and utility goats. Welcome to the show, Kate Johnson.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Kate, I was so excited when we met at the National Publicity Summit virtual, which had to happen virtually in April of 2020. I had it on my schedule to be traveling to New York, and I know that you did too.
Yes, I did too.
And you were one of the standout people who pitched to be on my podcast. And so I'm just super delighted that you're here with me today. And I would love to ask you what it was like for you to follow your own calling.
Oh my goodness, it's been so much fun. But it is kind of funny that I was coaching other people to do that. And in honesty, I was doing something I loved then too, because really probably that third thing that I love is kind of the training and development and the empowering piece. And so I was already doing that, but what I wasn't doing was really living out that farmy, cheesy part of my personality. And the other part of it is, sometimes the world just tells you what it wants you to be doing with your gifts. And I felt like I really wanted to be a life coach, and I was coaching and I loved it. But the world told me it had enough life coaches and it didn't have very many cheese coaches. And so when I would tell people, I'm a life coach, and they'd be like, yawn, everybody's a life coach. And I teach cheese making. You teach cheese making? And, the world just kept sending me this energy like, oh, we want to learn to make cheese. And so that was part of it for me, that I just had to do what seems to be the thing that was calling me to do.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, you and one other woman really stood out for me, and that was Marjorie Wildcraft, who was also a guest on the show earlier. And what's interesting is, as a result of everyone being sent home to their rooms over the course of 2020, a lot of people have had the opportunity to do a few things. Number one, they have a lot more time on their hands now that they're not commuting anymore, so that they actually do have the time to reflect and to discern and to make new choices for themselves. And number two, I am very sure that there were many people, myself included, I will include myself, that had a little bit of a panic attack when we went into the grocery store and shit wasn't on the shelves.
Oh, yeah.
And decided that we might want to do something about that. So I guess I want to hear about the nutritional value of cheese and why it's a really wise thing to have that skill set available to you.
Yeah, well, you bring up a really good point, that we've gotten kind of away from producing our own food. We're so used to just going to the store and anything we want is right there all the time. And I think when COVID hit, I've of course been doing this for years because I live on a farm and I have dairy animals and I grow some vegetables. I'm not as good at growing vegetables as making cheese. But I think the thing about cheese that's really magical to people is, I know when I first started, I was like, wow, you could make all these kinds of cheeses without being in a professional creamery and having some kind of professional training. That was what I heard from people. I love cheese, but I don't think I could make it. I'm like, but you actually can. It's a very ancient, very simple food. It's really just a way to make milk last longer and make it smaller. And we've been doing it for as long as there's been milk and people, right? And so I think for a lot of people, that just getting back to something so primal that happens to be really delicious. The nice thing about making your own cheese, just like making your own bread or whatever else, you know exactly what goes into it. And you aren't going to add anything that's maybe artificial or that's for, something that's more shelf life oriented. We're just going to make it and eat it at home. And so it's very pure. There's just not a lot of extraneous details in homemade cheese, which is, I think, also nutritionally, but also just the simplicity of it is just really enriching.
Well, I think it's brilliant that you were able to actually get the URL, The Art of Cheese. First of all, I think that's just super brilliant. And I love that you have turned your cheesemaking into a business and into a school where you're helping a lot of people. So I want to ask you a little bit about when people come to you to take your classes. Is it live? Have you had live classes in the past and now it's virtual?
Oh, yes.
Or help me understand what happens at the cheese
For
school.
sure. Yes. Well, up until the pandemic, almost all of our classes were live. We did have some online courses already developed and we had a DVD. But, the real fun with cheese making is to be there in person and get to taste it. It's a little hard to taste it through a computer screen. And then also, because I have dairy goats, my classroom actually is located on my farm. And so you got the whole farm experience. You got to come and meet the animals. Some of our classes, you actually got to milk the goat and then come in and make cheese. Not all of the classes did we do that. And we don't only use goat milk. We use all kinds of milk, including grocery store milk, because it's easy to access. But that's how we did it for years. And so people came here or we went places. So we did a couple of really fun retreats in Hawaii last winter. In fact, I got home a week before everything shut down. I was really lucky about that. So it was a big change for us to go to this type of format. And in fact, you talked about the shocking feeling of going to the grocery store. I was in a bit of shock the day everything closed because I was sold out for classes for 2-3 months out. And all of a sudden, everything was canceled. And I thought, how are we going to reach people now? They can't come here. It's not safe. It's too small. And so we had to do this huge pivot and get online. And so this is kind of the new thing, to do it this way. But It's working great. And we're meeting people now all over the world because people who couldn't come here or who are just stuck in their basement can now make cheese with us. So it's very fun.
That's beautiful. So I was going to ask you, can you use just regular grocery store milk? But you answered that question.
You can. Not all grocery store milk. There are some tricks to it, and that's part of the education, knowing which milks will work for which cheeses and why. But there's a lot of good milks that you can source at the grocery store.
Beautiful. So now how long have you been doing the Art of Cheese? And is that the name of your school as well, the Art of Cheese?
Yes, so that's the name of the school. And it officially started in 2014. That was the year we launched as the Art of Cheese. But I had been teaching probably for about 3 years before that under my farm name, and I didn't have a classroom space. So I just was a traveling cheese teacher. And that's when I would call it more of a hobby. That's when I was also life coaching and trying to build some of my other professional, identities. And so the cheese school didn't formally get launched until 2014.
And have you been a farmer your whole life? Has that always been a thing for you? Or did you buy your farm at did you have a midlife crisis or divorce?
No, exactly.
Is that your divorce farm?
No, this was called my childhood fantasy finally came true in my 40s. So I was a city kid, although it's interesting because my grandfather and my uncle, even my brother, we've all had farms, but we've all been basically city folks since my grandparent generations. but I always wanted to live on a farm. It just always called to me. I rode horses as a kid and, got my first horse when I was in high school, actually took him to college with me and lived on a farm in college. So I really had always wanted to live on a farm. And it just took me until I was in my 40s to finally figure out a way to do it and convince my husband and my then daughters, who were very excited about it because they also loved horses. And so that's how it started. So we've been here now for about 15 or 16 years. My kids pretty much grew up on the farm and they're now launched, but it was it was on my wish list for many, many, many years.
Beautiful. Well, my stock is farming stock as well. My mom's dad was a farmer and had an apple orchard and cows, and he was the milkman. And he was in their town. I think he was the milkman, the bus driver, and the policeman.
Right. Well, most of us, we don't go back too many generations. Most of our grandparents knew how to make cheese because they had a goat or a cow and they had to make cheese because you have all this milk. So it is something that's not that far back, but it seems like the last 2 or 3 generations got pretty removed from it. And now they're interested in coming back around, which is super fun.
Now that you don't have the school running live, what are you doing with all that milk? Are you making cheese and selling it in the farmer's market?
Oh my gosh, I am making so much cheese, I can't even tell you, but I can't sell it, which is really a shame. So, most states have very strict laws about cheese making and dairy products being sold, and only a regulated, USDA type of creamery. And that's a huge investment. And it's not really in my wheelhouse. That's more manufacturing. I don't want to do that full time because teaching is my passion. But so we can use our milk from an educational standpoint in classes, but we can't then turn around and sell that cheese. So it's piling up here.
And how long does cheese last? I mean, how long?
Well, it depends on what cheese you're making. So, there are fresh cheeses and those need to be eaten fairly quickly, usually 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, like mozzarella, buffalo mozzarella and stuff.
Yeah, and your cottage cheese and those types of things. But then there's a whole family of aged cheeses that, first of all, you don't get to eat for many months or maybe even years because they're aging. And then they last a long time once they're even ready to eat. So I've been making a lot of aged cheeses during this time and they're just aging. And I have all these little aging refrigerators in my space. I keep bringing new ones in as they fill. I'm going to have one big cheese party when this is all over.
Oh, I'm hearing that. Well, we're going to have one big break right now, Kate, but I'm so excited for your cheese. And I'm thinking to myself, of all the things we could do with that cheese, we need to have it more than a cheese party. We need to have like a cheese festival on your farm.
I know it, for sure.
All right. Well, we do have to take a quick break. Wickedly Smart Women, we actually could use your help. If you are enjoying this show and want us to stay on the air, please consider making a donation at www.wickedlysmartwomen.com. I also want to share with you that I have developed a brand new quiz to help you discern what your wealth readiness is, what your readiness level is for a wealthy life by design. And you can go take the quiz at quiz.wealthylifementor.com, and it will give you a scale of where you're at in terms of your wealthy life readiness. And if it is a fit for us to play together or work together, you'll find out more there after you've taken the quiz. And I do want to say a huge thank you to all of our listeners. We are welcoming thousands of downloads from all over the world, and we really appreciate those of you who are downloading, rating, and reviewing. I do want to shout out this week to our listeners in, let's look and see if we have any cheese countries on here. I think New Zealand might be a cheese country. So we'll shout out to New Zealand. And let's see, we have Switzerland. Switzerland is on here. They have Swiss cheese there, and there must be cheese in the UK. So we'll shout out to all of those places, and we will be right back with Kate Johnson.
The Wickedly Smart Women podcast is brought to you by the Wealthy Life Mentor. Women, are you on the edge knowing that life is calling you to make a change? Are you ready to be part of the evolution of what it means to be a wickedly smart woman, creating your wealthy life by design? A life that is an extraordinary work of art. Angel B. Hartwell, the Wealthy Life Mentor, is hired by women in transition. Women just like you who want to break through to their brilliance, become clear on the value of their wisdom, and embody a beauty-filled, balanced life of shameless self-expression. Discover your wealthy life readiness by taking the quiz at quiz.wealthylifementor.com.
And we are back with Kate Johnson. As I mentioned at the opening of the show, she is the owner and lead instructor at The Art of Cheese. You can find out more about Kate and about her virtual cheese school that is in the process of being launched, and her membership club for cheesemakers at theartofcheese.com. So please go to theartofcheese.com and let yourself indulge your cheesy nature.
I love it.
All right, Kate, I want to talk to you about valuing your own vision, because you are clearly somebody who has done that. And, you can attack this from the life coach side of things, but also from the experiential side of things, because you went and did your dream. Can you talk a little bit about your own maybe your own process, your own internal process for saying yes to yourself and really valuing your own vision and enrolling your husband and your family, and then ultimately the people who are working with you in the cheese school and your cheese students? Can you talk a little bit about that process for you?
Yeah, well, I think I've just always been a dreamer, and I've always been a doer. So when I have an idea, I tend to I run with it. I'm not really patient about sitting still. And I would say, if anything, probably one of my weaknesses, I get a lot of ideas and then I get a lot of irons in the fire, because I tend to do most of the ideas I have. So unlike a lot of people who have a hard time just getting started, I have a hard time not getting started. So I've had to prioritize these last few years, especially starting this actual business. When I was doing it as a hobby, I could just fit it in here and there. But once you're running a business, and I was a solo entrepreneur when this started, I now have a small staff that helps me out on things. But for the first year or two, it was just me, and I was wearing a lot of hats, and I was pretty stressed out about how many hats there were to wear when you're really trying to have a successful business. But I think for me, it just, I have two daughters, and I had a whole career before they came along, and I had gone to graduate school. But when I had these daughters, I decided to take some time off and stay home and be a full-time mom. And then at a certain point, I really wanted them to know that other side of me, right? I wanted them to know, yes, I'm choosing to be here and be your full-time mom, but I wear many other hats, and I want you to know you can too. And so I started doing a lot of entrepreneurial things that would allow me to do both my motherhood thing and my work thing. But pretty soon you can get pretty out of balance. You are trying to wear way too many hats. And so I think when I took on finally The Art of Cheese, I just decided, this is going to be the professional hat I'm wearing. And I had to let my life coaching piece go, because I couldn't build both businesses simultaneously, although I often call myself a cheese coach. So I'm still coaching people. I'm empowering you to do something you didn't know you could do, but it's in a different vein. So I think that's one of the really big things for me was knowing that if I was going to do this, I wanted it not to lose the fun. I wanted it to still be fun. And so I had to, in some ways, do fewer things in order to make this really work. Although most people that know me would laugh at that statement. They'd be like, "You're doing fewer things now?" I'm like, "Oh, I think I am."
Well, Kate, you and I are like two peas in a pod, because I'm exactly the same way. Lots of irons in the fire. People look at me and they call me the Energizer Bunny. And I completely agree with you. One of the things that I've been, learning myself over the course of my own business journey is you can wear a lot of hats. You can wear a lot of hats. And I often say I'm just good enough to be dangerous and not good enough to be great at a lot of things. And ultimately, so the lesson that I want you to hear, women who are listening, is twofold. Number one, stuff that you've been doing doesn't necessarily, even if it has to end, it gets reconstituted, almost like making cheese, right? Mm-hmm. Like the life coaching became the rennet in the cheese business, right?
Right. Exactly.
It gets folded in and it is of use. And that's the first thing that I want you to hear. So sometimes it feels like you're sacrificing, like, well, I don't want to give up this, or I don't want to give up that, or I don't want to give up this other thing. Well, sometimes you make sacred the one thing. Mm-hmm. And then all those other things ultimately can get woven into that one thing in a beautiful way. And so that's the other thing that I heard from you, Kate, that I want to just underscore for our listeners, is that when it's got your whole heart, right? Mm-hmm. Like cheesemaking, clearly you love the cheesemaking and it's fun. So let's underscore that for people as well. It's fun and it's funded because you now have a team. So it's making money for you. When you find that one thing that is the kind of conglomeration that's sticking together like cheese of all the things, then go into that wholeheartedly and really say yes to that wholeheartedly and be willing to prune away the things that aren't necessarily serving that. So That's beautiful. So I want to ask you one more question before we go, and that is, talk about asking for help, because I think that is something that is hard for a lot of people, especially when you start on your own gig and then sometimes you don't even know what to ask for, right? So can you talk about asking for help?
That is true. I think part of it is knowing the things that you really shine at and that you're good at them, you're efficient at it, you love doing it, it feeds you, and then know those pieces that really you don't love so much, or maybe it's not your strength as much, and maybe it's taking up way too much time for, to keep you from the thing that's really your gift and your passion. So for me, for instance, one of the things that's really important when you're running a business, but especially running a virtual business, there's a lot of pieces of technology that have to get put together to present a class online. We're videotaping, we're doing PowerPoint, we're doing Zoom, we're doing all these, and then there's all the programming of all of that. And I found that was just taking me so much time to put all the behind the scenes stuff together. And I just had to say, I think that I need help doing this piece, because it was slowing me down, and it was bringing me down. It wasn't the fun part of it, but it was necessary. It has to be done. And so being willing to pay somebody to do those things that frees you up to do the things that you really love doing, that are going to fuel you, that was really important to me. But even before I could pay people, I just had a really wonderful network of volunteers. I would have students that just said, I love your classes. I love your energy. Can I come and help? And I would say, yes, you can do dishes, and then you can come to class for free. So I do that on the farm too. There's a lot of cleaning up day after day. I have volunteers that come and they'll hang out with the goats and clean pens, and then I give them milk and I give them cheese classes. And there's a good, healthy barter system that also is a way to get help when you need help. But definitely asking for help is so important.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, we only have a couple minutes left. So before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our wickedly smart women to inspire them to go for their own dreams, or to inspire them to learn how to make cheese?
Yeah, I would say both of those things. But, one of the things I often tell people is, dream big. It's like brainstorming. Don't limit yourself in your dreams. Put all your dreams out there to the universe, and then start small. I think a lot of people have this huge dream, and then they think until they have every single piece of the puzzle in place, they can't take one step. And that's the thing that keeps people stuck. You just have to start with that one small step. For me, I started teaching cheesemaking to some friends in my kitchen. I didn't have a plan to open a cheesemaking school yet. I didn't even know if I wanted to. But it was one step. And that's what a lot of times I tell people is don't wait until you've got it all figured out, but have that big dream and just know that it's going to take a small step to get it started. And then that step will turn into another step and it will open up opportunities. And it's kind of how cheese is too, to be honest with you. Start with a really easy cheese because there are harder ones. And just start with an easy one and see how fun it is. And then grow with your cheese making as you feel like you're ready.
Beautiful. Well, one of the things that I do want to make sure that people hear there in that one step at a time thing and having it all figured out before you get started. The truth of any business, I don't know if this is true for you, Kate, but it certainly as sure as heck is true for me. You're never going to have it all figured out because as soon as you think you do have it all figured out, boom, there's a big change. Pandemic hits. And now you got to figure. And I actually stopped figuring things out a few years ago and decided I'm not figuring anything out anymore. I'm figuring in. Exactly. So I want to figure in self-care. I want to figure in milking the goats in your case. I want to figure in training my trainers. I want to figure in how I'm going to build this online virtual thing. And it's a figuring in that's happening all the time. And
it is.
So the other thing I just want to really encourage our listeners to hear is Kate's focused on fun. And that fun is going to carry you. Fun will carry you through some not so fun things.
Yeah.
So I love that you have that focus on fun, and I love that you are so cheesy and wonderful. And I bet your cheese is awesomely delicious. And maybe you can send a hunk of cheese to each of the virtual students who enroll in your class to distribute the cheese. Right? It's a bonus. You get some cheese from the farm.
I know. I wish there was an easy way to do that, or even a legal way to do that for that matter.
Well, can you gift cheese? Are you allowed to gift?
Technically, in our state, the law reads you cannot provide cheese, that's homemade. Now, that it's a little gray area, I guess. But, what's even more empowering is why don't I teach you to make your own cheese? Because it's even more gratifying when you made it yourself. And it's so much easier than I think people think. So, I would just say, don't be afraid to jump in there and do it. I mean, my first cheese making, I didn't know what I was doing. I started with the recipe and I'm like, oh, that's all there is to it? I hadn't even read the whole recipe yet. So go ahead and just try it. It's amazingly gratifying.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again for being with us, Kate. Listeners, we do love feedback. Please let us know what you thought of today's show by calling into our listener line. We will have that in the show notes for you. Or you can send in questions or guest suggestions to listeners at wickedlysmartwomen.com. We might even give you a shout out on the show. Thanks for tuning in. Keep your ears open and remember, you are a wonderful woman.
Thanks for tuning in, downloading, and listening. Be sure to rate and review Wickedly Smart Women on Apple Podcasts and share with other women who can benefit from today's episode. Wickedly Smart Women is the premier podcast series for informing, activating, and inspiring the leader who carries profound wisdom and knows that now is the time to welcome wealth. We welcome your feedback and guest suggestions and invite you to subscribe to our mailing list to be notified of each new episode at wickedlysmartwomen.com.